The British Grand Prix is over and F1 has its third different winner in as many races. But now F1 heads to Budapest for the Hungarian Grand Prix as the summer break is closing in. Which means that once again it is time for my preview and predictions. This is a series where I'll be previewing and then at the end of the video I'll be giving out my early predictions for the Grand Prix. If you enjoyed the video then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now, let's get into the video. As usual, I'll be talking about the top 5 teams later on, which is Aston Martin, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull, so stick around for that. Yes, F1 is heading to Budapest, which is a completely different circuit to what the last 3 rounds were. Spain and Silverstone are very high-speed circuits, and Austria is a very short circuit with plenty of big stops. Budapest, however, is often referred to as Monaco without the barriers, and that is because the cars are constantly changing direction and there are no real long straights, and the pit straight itself is not that long. The teams don't have to worry about high-speed corners so much. Because of that, expect the teams to crank on as much downforce as they can possibly get away with, like they would with Monaco. The circuit also features some very tight and slow corners, which requires the teams to ride the curbs as well, so teams like Red Bull might not be as strong as they usually are. Although of course I still expect Max Verstappen to be in the mix because he always is. Also I expect Alpine to have a better chance than usual, because they don't have to worry so much about the Renault power unit being underpowered. With the circuit being a slow speed circuit and all of the corners that the circuit has, the softest tyres are required in the Pirelli range, which means that the C3 is the hard tyre, the C4 is the medium tyre, and the C5 will be the soft compound of tyre. Even though the softest tyres are brought, tyre wear around the Budapest circuit is very high still, and the undercut is incredibly powerful, meaning that we should expect a multi-stop race. Last year there was a total of 36 pit stops with the drivers using the medium and hard compound of tyre. The weather in Budapest right now and for the race is expected to be pretty hot as well, and because of that I can expect tyre wear to be even higher than it was last year, so much so that it could be a mixture of 2 and 3 stops, with the undercut being very powerful. Overtaking at Budapest is very tricky. As I mentioned, it is Monaco without the barriers, but it is still possible at this circuit, especially if there is a big tyre delta, and last year there was a total of 16 on-track overtakes. To help with overtaking, the Budapest circuit features 2 DRS zones. The first DRS zone is down the pit straight heading into turn 1, and the second DRS zone is on the exit of turn 1 heading into turn 2. Both zones are usually used for overtaking. If the drivers don't get the overtake done into turn 1, then they can use it to set themselves up to overtake at turn 2. The second DRS zone though is a much more risky overtake, which means that if it does come off, it usually looks pretty exciting. Last year, the pole position lap time was a 1:16.609, and that time was set by Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. During that lap, Hamilton reached a top speed of 310 km per hour. In the race itself, the fastest lap in the Grand Prix was set by Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, and that time was a 1:20.504. In this year's race, I expect that the race fastest lap will be beaten if it is a 3-stop race, and the qualifying pole lap might be around the same time as last year, depending on how hot it is on track. I just want to say that if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now though, let's get back to the video and let's talk about the top 5 teams, starting with Aston Martin. For Aston Martin, the British Grand Prix was a good race. They were not the top midfield team in the finishing positions, as that honour belonged to Haas and Nico Hülkenberg, but still, with Stroll in P7 and Alonso in P8, they pretty much maximised their Grand Prix and scored some very valuable points as they continued to cling on to 5th in the Constructors' Championship. Going into the Hungarian Grand Prix though, I can see this one being a much more difficult race for them. We have seen at other high downforce races this year that they have generally really struggled. The Aston Martin is also not the kindest car on their tyres, so I can see them struggling for points this weekend, and I expect them to be beaten by the Alpine team, as long of course as Alpine doesn't take each other out in the race. For Mercedes, they made it 2 wins in a row as Lewis Hamilton won his first race since the 2021 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and Mercedes really look like they've gotten on top of their issues now. Russell got pole position in Canada, he won the race in Austria with a bit of help from others, and now Lewis Hamilton has won the British Grand Prix on pace. And before the rain came down, they had the pace over Verstappen and Red Bull. Going into this weekend, I can see them being very strong yet again. Lewis Hamilton has fantastic form around this circuit in general, and last year they did get pole position. Mercedes have vastly improved their car now, and it is strong in a lot of areas. One of their biggest weakest points earlier in the season was tyre wear and keeping them alive over a stint. With good performances though now in Spain, Austria and also at Silverstone, I think they may have gotten over those issues, and I can see them being strong and in contention at the front of the field yet again. For McLaren, the British Grand Prix was yet another race that they should have won, but did not. Lando Norris on the team radio was asked about the tyre choice, but the way that the team described it made it obvious that they didn't know what to do. In hindsight, if they went for mediums like they did with Piastri, they would have won the Grand Prix. And if they didn't keep Piastri out on a wet track for an extra lap, then they could have very easily gotten a 1-2 finish. This again is showing that whilst McLaren might have the fastest car in terms of race trim, they are operationally still lacking what the likes of Red Bull have, and there is still work to do. Thankfully for them, the Hungarian Grand Prix should be a great track for them. They are very strong in the slower speed sections now, and they are generally very good on their tyres. We have seen now multiple times that when the grip starts to fade, McLaren tend to get stronger, especially with Lando Norris. They need to lean on that this weekend and put everything together. There is no doubt that if they can, then they should win this weekend, especially if Red Bull are a little bit weaker at this circuit. Lando I expect to be very strong, but teammate Piastri I fear will be very fast in qualifying, but weaker in the race. He is still a little bit slower when it comes to race pace, especially over a full stint, and with high tyre wear, I can see him being a little bit more vulnerable to some of the cars that would otherwise be behind him. For Ferrari, the nightmare continued at Silverstone as a poor tyre call by the team saw Charles Leclerc drop out of any contention. Meanwhile, teammate Carlos Sainz had a better run and was for a bit fighting Verstappen. However, once it dried out, we really got to see how Ferrari have fallen back from the 3 teams that are now ahead of them in terms of pace at high-speed circuits. Thankfully for them, as I said, Budapest is known as Monaco without the barriers, and well, they were very strong at Monaco. They don't have to worry about high-speed bouncing as much here, as there's not really that many high-speed corners, and the high-speed bouncing is what has been a real issue for them in the last few races. So with that in mind, I can see them being closer to the top 3 teams that are ahead of them. Is it going to be enough for them to get amongst it for a podium though? Honestly, I'm not too sure about that. But if they nail everything, then at the very least, one of them should finish in the top 5. Charles Leclerc is going to be wondering where all of his luck has gone this season. Since Monaco, every race pretty much has seen an issue of some kind creep in. And honestly, he will just be looking for a clean weekend, because I can see him being pretty strong in the race, provided he doesn't have any issues, due to how good he is on tyre wear typically, and like I said, I expect tyre wear to be pretty high this weekend. And finally for Red Bull, Verstappen finished in 2nd place after what turned out to be a very difficult race. At the beginning in the dry, Verstappen was really struggling for pace and ended up losing positions to both McLaren cars, and also was starting to fall into the clutches of Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. But after the rain, Verstappen used a fresh set of hard tyres to make a great recovery and almost ended up winning the race. Teammate Sergio Perez though had another race to forget. He, like Leclerc, came in for inters when it stopped raining, but in general Perez was very poor. He had a shocking qualifying and he didn't have great pace when the race started. Going into Budapest, I can see it being another weekend to forget for Sergio Perez, as I can see him going out very early in qualifying, as the car will not be as strong this weekend. Verstappen though will perform miracles once again and extract every ounce of performance from his car, but I don't know if it will be enough to overcome what should be a very strong Mercedes and McLaren, with Ferrari potentially in the mix if they can get everything together. So with that in mind then, what are my early predictions for the Hungarian Grand Prix? Well, the top midfield team and midfield driver, I am going to go for Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. That is, of course, if Alpine doesn't explode and if the two drivers don't come together during the race, which, well, let's be honest, there's a good chance that will happen. But what about pole position? Well, for pole position, I am going to go for Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes to take another pole position, as he did take pole last year, and Mercedes are starting to look pretty good now. But what about the top 5 for the Grand Prix? Well, in P5, I'm going to go for Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. P4 will be George Russell in the Mercedes. P3 will be Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. P2 will be Lewis Hamilton. And I am going to go for Lando Norris to put it all together and to make it another win. But what do you guys think will happen? In the comment section down below, please do let me know. And as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.